Welcome to the Essential Zodiac, a bi-weekly podcast about astrology and astrological events. Now here's your host, astrologer Cynthia McNulty.
Thank you, Audrey. Welcome, everybody. I am super excited about this episode because we have a very special guest this time. And we are going to talk about something that is very important to me, my spirituality. I've talked about this a little bit, but to give you the simplified version, I've been a student of the Western Mystery tradition for over 20 years now, and I really live my life according to the seasons. In the spring, I launch my new goals and ideas and plans. I tend them in the summer, and I harvest them in the fall. In the winter, I rest, I review the year, and I prepare for spring again. And along the way, there are rituals and celebrations. And one such celebration is happening on Tuesday of the coming week, the Summer Solstice, or Letha, as we call it. And the Summer Solstice marks the official start of summer. It brings the longest day and the shortest night of the year for those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere. In the Southern Hemisphere, they are experiencing the winter solstice, and they are now in winter. The summer solstice is also known as midsummer or Letha. And I'm sure some of you out there are familiar with Shakespeare's Midsummer's Night's Dream. It's a very good movie if you ever get the chance to watch it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an astronomy lesson here. And we can calculate the exact moment for the solstice when the Earth reaches the point in its orbit where the North Pole is angled closest to the sun. Now, that moment will be on Tuesday, June 21st at 9:13 a.m. Universal Time. From Earth, the sun will appear farthest north relative to the stars. So now people living on the Tropic of Cancer, which is north of the equator, will see the sun pass straight overhead. And to review our Earth science classes, the Tropic of Cancer is the most northerly circle of latitude on Earth, and at which the sun can be seen directly overhead. Now, it was named the Tropic of Cancer about 2,000 years ago when the sun was in the zodiac sign of Cancer, hence the name. 6 months from now, the sun will reach its southern extreme and pass overhead for the Tropic of Capricorn, and will experience the shortest day and longest night of the year. So now, back in the day, they didn't, of course, have the instruments that we have today to check on the planetary movement. So the angle of the sun is hard to see without these instruments. And it looks like the sun is standing still. Hence, the word solstice comes from solar standstill. It takes about 10 days for it to be perceived without instruments. Now, when the sun is in Cancer, the sun is more reserved. It's sensitive. It's a cardinal sign, meaning it heralds the coming of the season, this time summer. And it represents our roots, our family, home, our emotions. The sun in Cancer is sensitive, intuitive, and maternal. So when the sun is in Cancer, we are reminded of our roots and to connect or reconnect with family, either your biological family or your family of choice. So now Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain in England, Karnak in Egypt, and Chanquillo in Peru reveal that people around the world have taken note of the sun's northern and southern travels for more than 5,000 years. From Stonehenge's circle of standing stones The sun will rise directly over an ancient avenue leading away to the northeast on the solstice. Now, I think Stonehenge is the most familiar with everybody. And it is not just an astronomical tool, but a sacred spot where people have worshipped the sun for centuries.
I just have to ask.
Sure.
So you've got UTC in here, Universal Time. What is that in Eastern Standard Time?
That will be 5:13 a.m.
a.m. All right, great. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
I knew you'd
You're
have that
welcome.
on the tip of your tongue. You can find the Essential Zodiac on your favorite podcast sites. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Please like, share, and follow our podcast, and we hope you'll share it with your friends too. Have a question about astrology for Cynthia? Send a note to ezpodcast@yahoo.com. ezpodcast@yahoo.com.
Now, for the exciting part of the podcast. We are now going to talk about the spiritual side of the solstice, and I want to welcome RavenHarte, my high priestess of Clan Calduk and my dearest friend. Welcome, and thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, of course.
So now, we spoke about the astronomy of the solstice. So, what is the spiritual significance?
So the summer solstice in mythological terms for our tradition is the point of the year where the young sun god, here we know him as the Lord of the Greenwood, makes a choice to set aside his, quote, wild ways and the freedoms of his youth and accept the responsibility of kingship that the pregnant goddess of sovereignty offers to him. He does this hesitantly, even fearfully, because he has full understanding that in accepting this role, his whole life will change, that he is sacrificing himself. This is also symbolized in the Oak and the Holly King battle, where two brothers, who are really two halves of the same whole, fight to the death at each of the solstices. Both myths signify the death of ego and the inner strength and maturity it takes to do that, because it's only when we can sacrifice the image of ourselves as we think we are that we will find the self that we truly are.
Awesome. That is very, very true. So what would you say is important to understand about the summer solstice?
Summer is at the height of fullness and well-being. And at the summer solstice, the god, symbolized by the sun, gives over his full blazing strength to the goddess, symbolized by the earth, so that life on earth can continue and to bear fruit. It's a celebration of this transference of power, sun to earth, god to goddess. It carries none of the urgency of spring, or the gratefulness of harvest, or the deep introspection of winter. It's a celebration of the simple joy of light, life, love. And fun fact, the solstice hasn't always been the start of summer, as our modern calendars lead us to believe. According to the old folk traditions, summer actually starts at Beltane, which is May 1st, and the solstice is called midsummer because it is halfway point between Beltane and Lammas on August 1st when summer ends.
Yeah, during my research, I saw that, and I was thinking, yes, that makes total sense. Yeah, I could see where, Beltane certainly fits, and the solstice is definitely in the middle of summer. And it's interesting, too, is that, summer is always, it fits so well because summer is joyful. It's when most people take vacations, when you kind of relax. The days are longer, so you have more time to socialize. I remember when I was a kid, my parents and all the neighbors, sitting on the porches and drinking coffee and just socializing. So we kind of don't do that anymore. I kind of miss that. But what are some folklore or customs associated with the solstice?
So I think for starters, something that many pagans don't know is that it's very unlikely that our European ancestors called the festival Midsummer's Eve, like we think now, or Litha for that matter. Most folklore about it calls it by its Christian holiday name, St. John's Eve. St. John the prophet, who was born 6 months before Jesus and heralded Jesus' birth. The oak king, if you will, to Jesus' holly king. Interestingly, in folklore, he is even referred to as an oak king, connected to the wilderness and forests, and has not only been depicted with horns, but also is depicted with the lower half of his body as the form of a satyr. St. John's Eve is often celebrated with bonfires, which makes sense because this is a celebration of the height of the sun's strength. So most of the Celtic folklore and customs revolve around fire. In Ireland and Scotland, bonfires, called balefires, a name derived from either the Celtic sun god Bel, which means bright, or the Saxon word Baal, which means fire. People jumped over them for luck or to symbolize the growth of the harvest. Animals were driven close to them for purification. Special types of bone, wood, flowers, and herbs were offered to them so that otherworldly beings and spirits might grant them boons and favors. In fact, gathering sacred herbs, such as the Druids did, was especially important on the solstice because it was thought that the midday summer sun imbued the herbs with healing power. Gathering water from lakes and rivers the midsummer sun shone on was done for the exact same reason. And many weddings were held on the solstice because it's considered the wedding day of the god and goddess too, so therefore lucky. And of course, across the world, people will be awakening early to watch sunrise, especially at the sites Cindy has already talked about.
So, yeah. And with the power of the internet, if you're so inclined, Stonehenge does have a live feed that you can watch. You can watch the sunrise over Stonehenge. So that's pretty cool.
It is so cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, right. You know, I mean, if you can't be there, like some of us would like to be, it's kind of the next best thing. You can, of course, watch your own sunrise off your back porch, but that's kind of cool over Stonehenge. So, RavenHarte, if my listeners are inspired to do so, how can they celebrate to get the most out of the solstice?
So the easiest way to honor the height of the god's power is to get out in his light. Enjoy the sun. Revel in the way the sun nourishes the earth. To honor the goddess, go to your local farmer's market or summer festival and share in the bounty the earth provides. Spend time outdoors with those you love. Play and have fun. It's like you were talking about before, Cindy. People don't get together anymore. There's backyard barbecues and morning coffees. This is the way to celebrate the light of Letha. And as the charge of the goddess tells us, sing, dance, feast, make music and love.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, so how about it out there? How about everybody have a solstice picnic? Invite your friends and your neighbors, get together. I think after all that we've been through, the 2.5+ years and still, we could use some good fellowship and blessings of the divine. So I will leave you with that. I thank RavenHarte so much for being here, and hopefully I can convince her to come back on the winter solstice, so we'll see. But so everybody out there, enjoy the summer solstice in any way that you can. And remember, with astrology, you can chart your own life. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for joining us for our first special guest episode. Join us next week when we'll be talking about the new moon in Cancer. Visit EssentialZodiac.com for more information about Cynthia McNulty. While you're there, check out her monthly specials and consider becoming a patron of this podcast. Cynthia has posted several Patreon levels, and there are lots of goodies for her patrons. The Essential Zodiac podcast is produced at Muddy Creek Studios.